Sandusky Maritime, and the Underground Railroad.
Slavery started on our soil before we were a country. When slave owner Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, he wrote that all men are created equal.
In 1803, when Ohio became a state, slavery was illegal.
Not everyone of African descent was enslaved.
In 1813, when Naval Commodore Perry anchored his fleet at Sandusky, free black men constituted about 15% of the crew. After Perry's victory in the Battle of Lake Erie, settlement increased. Sailing ships carried immigrants west and returned east with agricultural products. Sandusky's large navigable harbor attracted merchant sailing vessels. In 1818, travel on Lake Erie sped up when the first Lake Erie steamboat was built, a paddle wheeler named Walking the Water. The entire trip from Buffalo to Erie, Cleveland, Toledo, Sandusky, and finally to Detroit and Amherstburg could be covered in only 9 days.
People escaping slavery boarded Sandusky boats to Canada with the help of free black Sanduskians.
Many of these stories were published by Sandusky lawyer Rush Sloan.
The first runaway slave in Sandusky was in the fall of the year 1820. He was taken by friends to a tavern on the corner of Wayne and Water Street. To John Dunker, who was the tavern owner. He was assisted by Captain Shepard, who owned a small vessel. A slave owner offered Shepard $300 to find him. They waited and watched for 3 days with no success.
The steamboat Walk in the Water came in port bound for Detroit, and the slave owner, thinking his slave might have gone there, went on the boat.
And soon after, Captain Shepard left with the slave on board and arrived safely at Malden. In 1831, a fugitive named Tice Davids arrived from Ripley, Ohio, and stayed some time in Sandusky. He then went to Canada. It was said his mysterious disappearance gave the name Underground Road.
The word underground meant secret, not tunnel.
Sloan told another secret story of a Sandusky boat builder who helped enslaved people escape by walking across the lake ice.
There was hardly a time that Henry R. Mary didn't have one or more slaves in his employ. In the winter of 1839-40, a group of 4 fugitives arrived, but they were so hotly pursued that it was thought best not to keep them in town, and as the ice wasn't strong enough to have a horse and sleigh, they were conducted with the greatest of caution, and to the shore of Kelly's Island, and then to Point Pelee, where they arrived in safety.
But not everyone supported even allowing an abolitionist like Frederick Douglass to speak in Sandusky. When the Lake Erie and Mad River Railroad linked Cincinnati with Sandusky, fugitives from slavery were hidden aboard the trains to Sandusky and then were smuggled aboard steamships headed to Amherstburg or Windsor. Secreting escaping people aboard trains required ingenuity. The train brought an unusual parcel to the double house of successful black brothers Sam Irvine, a grocer, and John Irvine, builder.
In 1855, on a certain train going north, was placed the coffin of a poor man. He was going to Sandusky for interment. The rough box had knotty holes and plenty of shavings had been placed around the body, and he was taken into the care of the Irvins. When the casket was opened, his mouth was foaming, his eyes were bloodshot, he was nearly dead.
The Reverend Thomas Boston assisted fugitives traveling through the south side of Sandusky. According to Sloan,
in 1843, a fugitive named Joe Daniel came across the line to Sandusky. He was taken to Reverend Thomas Boston, who then resided in Perkins Township. Fearing Joe might be captured, Reverend Boston advised him to go to Canada.
William Wells Brown worked aboard a steamship that ran from Buffalo to Detroit with a staff of 20 to 50, many of them black. Brown smuggled 69 people from slavery disguised as crew members.
Between 1820 and 1860, sailing ships coexisted alongside merchant sailing vessels. Josiah Henson tells the story of how he and his family boarded a sailing vessel to go to Canada.
We came out west of Sandusky City. I hid my companions in the bushes. I observed a vessel. I was asked if I wanted to work and soon entered into conversation about the best route to Canada. He told the captain, who offered to take my family to Buffalo, whither they were bound. Then Captain Burnham put us on board the ferry boat across to Canada.
They arrived in Canada as expected, and when they got there, Josiah kissed the ground with joy.
Published in 1852, Uncle Tom's Cabin sold over 1 million copies and touched readers' hearts.
In 1850, the Fugitive Slave Act was passed, and this really changed everything for fugitive slaves. In the Sandusky household of Orrin and Eliza Follett, it was a topic of conversation. Orrin Follett was a practically minded businessman who was concerned about the ramifications if anyone were to be caught with fugitive slaves. Eliza Follett was a tender-hearted, kind, giving woman who was more concerned about the health and well-being of these human beings. No one knows the countless number of fugitives that she sheltered, gave clothing and food and water to on their way to Canada. Orrin Follett said to Eliza, "Woman, it is against the law," to which she responded, "Husband, there's a higher law."
That higher law lived at First Anti-Slavery Baptist Church.
Member John B. Lott advertised in the newspaper that donations to help those fleeing to liberty could be brought to his barbershop on Water Street. Lott and Sloan's convictions intersected at the mayor's office.
On October 20th, 1852, Sandusky was the scene of the arrest of 2 men, 2 women, and 3 children by some Kentuckian. The slaves were going on board the Arrow on her departure for Detroit, but were forcibly dragged ashore. Upon reaching the mayor's office, we found excited people with pistols and bowie knives in the hands of many. I then asked, "Are there any papers or writs to show why these people are being held?" I heard no reply. I then said, "I see no authority for these people to be held." At this, John B. Lott, a colored man, cried, "Hustle them out!" I was finally compelled to pay $3,000 in the District Court of the United States.
In Sandusky, while slave catchers watched the steamship docks, fishing boat captains smuggled people to Canada on their Sharpies. In 1853, Captain George Sweagles sailed his fishing Sharpie to Canada, carrying 4 people escaping from slavery. They left Sandusky in the small craft around 8 p.m., sailed past Pelee, and reached Canada the next morning.
By 1860, the first year of the Civil War, there were 2 notable settlements in Canada. Windsor, which had more than 700 former slaves, and Amherstburg, which had more than 800 former slaves.
But the anti-slavery actions of Sandusky's black community continued. In 1863, Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. African Americans could now enlist in Northern regiments.
In Sandusky, 26 African Americans enlisted in the Union Army and got on board an eastbound train, risking their lives to end slavery. The community raised $5,000 for the Civil War volunteers.
From the 1820s through the Civil War, free black Sanduskians deserve the credit for escorting, secreting, and arranging boat travel for those who traveled through Sandusky on their way to freedom.